Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts on Saturday morning, the first of 2024, which I will take at least a year to start writing down correctly every time I do a statement of work. And it's great. There's so many of you here, and I appreciate that. And I'm laughing because between Braden saying they better make it a good one, we have expectations, or tank so they can show improvement over time. That is good. That is always the best metric. Throw the worst one out there. When you do YouTube, which I've been slacking on, you get this wonderful like 0 of 10, like 1 of 10, 9 of 10, where it rates your last video. Someone said, well, how do I get the first one? You tank 9 in a row. That is your success. But between Taylor and Braden and Gator, I am laughing because there's obviously this is going to be a heated, I want to say debate, discussion. We're talking about like how do we approach the topic? How do you define education? And let me assure you right now, there is no plan. This is not planned out. This is not organized in any way. So let's go to the point of like where this conversation came from and where it started was I had a couple people reach out to me saying, how do I get started in this industry? I was looking at I was getting really fed up, to be honest, I'm looking at the schooling for my daughters, and it kind of gets frustrating because I run my own business and toot and all of that. But you realize that our education system is not built to, I would say, make hackers, and that's maybe a grandiose way of saying it. But Gowrie, I'm asking you, like, our education system still is building, I believe, is still building factory workers, and we don't have any factories anymore. We've kind of moved on with factories, and we're designing the education system around 8 to 5. Here are your tasks. Finish your task. And it feels like it hasn't kept up with where, we'll say, the current job market is, at least from a technology side.
And I do think it's fair to kind of split when we say schooling, right? Just about everyone will split it into like 4 major chunks, right? Primary school, middle school, high school, college. We can have the debate about college, but I think what we're talking about right now is maybe the middle school to high school range of, before that, you're teaching basic skills, how to just be a kid, more or less. Recess still exists, which made me sad in high school that we didn't get recess because that, why wouldn't we? But yeah, so I think if we focus on that area for just a moment, and, full disclosure, I don't have kids, so I'm a neophyte on the current school system, but not that far removed from high school to remember and to know during, I'd say, heyday of the internet, if you will, they certainly were not teaching you anything that would have been useful in today's society at that time. And yeah, I think it's a little frustrating. And Silk and I were having a discussion off screen last night about what were some of the most formative or most useful things you were taught in school that helped you become a hacker. And the funny thing is, nothing in particular. Like, I had a programming class. I went to a decent school, a decent public school that actually had programming classes in the mid 2000s. And the most useful thing I learned in that class was when the teacher either wasn't there or wasn't really paying attention, we figured out how to set up N64 emulators and like tunnel locally so that we could play multiplayer like Mario Kart in the computer lab. And, looking back, she totally knew. But at the same time, that unstructured tinker time of trying to make it work is actually the most useful thing you can do to become a hacker, because it creates that sense of curiosity. It creates that sense of, here's this big, complicated problem I don't understand at all, but we can figure it out, right? And I think there's a lot of that missing, or was missing, at least from my middle and high school curriculum. It was all very much, as you said, designed to make a factory worker, designed to make somebody who could, make change at a register and know how to sew. And some of those are basic life skills, but it was more focused on like, when you get out of high school, these skills are going to help you in the world. And by and large, they didn't.
You mentioned learning how to sew. Did you actually have like, what was it, home ec or home?
Yeah.
Home
Like I said,
education?
I went to a public school, but I it was a good, in retrospect, it was a very good public school, right? There was home ec, there was a woodworking shop, there was like a handful of programming classes, there were media classes, things like that. And you got to kind of pick a couple of things each year. Everything else was the normal, like math, humanities, all that stuff.
So I went to a private school. The public school was having some issues, so we did private school is where we went. And there's kind of two pieces. I feel the education in the school, but there wasn't home ec. It was a very small school. There wasn't a lot of those. There was zero, like the computer class is incredibly basic, like how to use a computer. Now I'm maybe a few years before you, but like there wasn't any programming. Like Pascal and all of those existed. They didn't teach any of those. What I would say there where I graduated, I didn't catch up mathematically until my third or fourth year of college, like doing like discrete mathematics, because they had gone all the way through calculus. Now here's the kicker: is I don't use calculus in anything I do, and if I was ever to use calculus, I'm guessing I just go online and ask ChatGPT to do all of my math for me. And ChatGPT is terrible for math, but there is a lot of that education which I didn't use, and I would say computer. It was so my father worked at the utility. He was a substation operator, and he would bring back like when they would junk out old hardware. Again, he was smart enough not to grab like giant capacitors because that would be a terrible idea. But he would bring back old hardware for me to go tinker with. And none of it was work. It was mostly just taking it apart, trying to put it back together and things like that. But at Tinker Time is probably where I learned more of that, like tweaking that curiosity. It wasn't in school. And part of it, I think, is this the structure of homework and how it works. And a lot of it is it's daily. It's daily, like 8 to 3, 8 to 3, 8 to 3, 8 to 3. And there's not even a time for like your brain to necessarily rest either.
I have always thought homework was detrimental to my health and well-being. And even today, whenever I get the feeling that someone is assigning me homework to do outside of normal business hours, I develop a deep disdain. Deep disdain. It's like you're going on PTO or whatever, and someone says, "Oh, while you're on PTO, give some thought to this problem." Like I'm gonna punch that person in the face. I am not allowed to like turn my brain off 90% of the year, and then the one time I'm not present at work, you want me to think about something? Whack. All right.
So we call vacation at TUIC when we're company. We call it going Gilligan mode. Is if you're going if you're doing if you're going to a dentist or something, we're consultants. Your job is to get your work done. It's not to punch a clock. I don't really care when you get your work done because that we get paid for you to do work. Go do work, and that's good. I don't care about punching the clock. And we go when you go on, like if you have to go leave for a dentist, don't take vacation for that. Don't take PTO for that. I don't care. I care about like if they're going to be gone for a week and it's vacation, go Gilligan mode. Like, you don't have to check email unless you want to. You don't, because sometimes like for me, I'm different. I own the company, but like as far as like I check my email on vacation because then even when I was working, because then I didn't get like a barrage of like a zillion things I had to catch up on. Again, consultant life a little bit different, but unless I need to reach you with smoke signals or something like that, don't answer the phone. If the company cannot survive you leaving, we have set this company up wrong.
So this started with homework, right? And the point being, like, even today, some of my friends that have kids that are going through high school now, they talk about things, and I've asked them on occasion. I was like, were we ever this managed as kids? Like, it feels like kids aren't allowed to have that tinker time that we had, which was like basically me being left alone with a computer on the internet, which is terrifying. At 13, but it feels like there's not like they must be occupied and must be learning at all times. So if it's like, if they have an unfilled space, they always say, oh, they need to learn an instrument. They need to do this. They have to do this. I have a non-trivial number of friends they're not helicopter parents, but they have filled their children's time such that there is no room for boredom. And that is completely bizarre to me, right? Because that boredom is what sparks that curiosity. I guess it's a little different with phones today, but like that boredom was very important to developing the curiosity about the world. If everything's on a schedule and you're learning to do 9 to 5, except your 9 to 5 is like 7 to 10 p.m., you never have space to develop who you are. And Silk and I were talking about this before. Basically, uh, now high schools, junior, maybe even sophomore year, they're starting to teach kids how to, not starting to, they've been doing this for a long time. They're teaching kids how to apply for colleges. What a bizarre concept. A school teaching kids how to get into a school. Of what use is that exact skill except for that one? Like, what a bizarre concept when you break it down and think about it. You're like, this system, what is it teaching? Right. And so when we named this, is our education system broken? That's what we're talking about. Not like, are they teaching the right things? Are they doing this or that? Like, what is it reinforcing in us if we're just teaching the system and how it's like the perfect, it's like being a hacker, right? You see the system and you're like, I'm going to optimize the shit out of this system, or I'm going to break this system, except they optimized it or broke it in the shittiest way possible.
Well, I think it goes back to what is the purpose of education, and I don't mean to be like, well, like what is the purpose of education? But like, the purpose of education was to be educated, was to grow inside the
Yeah.
ability to teach yourself, to learn how to learn. It wasn't to, here are the things you need to learn. It was to be educated. And here's the thing is, if it was, and even if it is now, the here are the things you need to learn, if someone actually looks at the curriculum, here are the things you need to learn, what is in, what is out? Calculus is definitely out. I'm sorry.
No,
I know
I
other
disagree.
people can use it. I know many mechanical engineers, electrical engineers never use it. I know you came up with a reason, but like, what would be in there? How to actually run, how to budget money, how to file
Yeah.
taxes, how to do basic repairs on your own house, how to know whether or not you can afford the house you're living in, like how to cook. Holy crow! Like how to cook should be like the most basic living, balanced nutrition, like just little things. Now you learn some of that. There's physical education, which or health class. I do kind of vaguely remember that, but it was more like here is the entire structure of the human body. And I would say, in like priority wise, I would rather learn how to have a balanced nutrition versus here's the entire structure of the human body. But flipping that back is if the purpose of education is to be educated, in that tinker time, I should be able to follow my passions. And I think that's where I think the education system is broken. Of I should, again, should, I don't always like that word, but I should be able to follow my passions and then have the resources available to get the research I need for those. If you find yourself passionate about computers, why can't I go dive deep into computers and take all the other crap and kind of push it off and go, okay, I'll get a little bit of awareness on this, but I want to focus in on this one, almost like almost like a trade school.
I mean, a very good reason for that, and I'm going to break you here, is that you don't do computers for the sake of computers. You do computers to enable other domains to use computers. Does that make sense? Right. So, if I want to go in, if I want to go into computer science, chances are I'm not going to be a computer scientist in the purest sense. I'm going to go work for a biology company, and I need to know enough of the domain to help them develop the software they need to do their job. So this is the concept of enrichment, right? This is why I think calculus is important. Uh, in part so that when you see problems, you get a sense. You don't need to know exactly how to solve them all the time. You just get a sense of like the behavior of a function, right? Which is relevant if you're doing actual mathematical programming. So like it depends on what you're doing. But yeah, I don't entirely disagree with what you're talking about, but I do think the enrichment piece, and this is why I said at the beginning, we have to separate the middle and high school era with college. I think there's other problems with college, but the two are really fundamentally different, right? I've always said that up through high school, you're learning how to be a functional human being, and then in college you're learning how to learn, which is what you said. Right? So
I'm go on.
go ahead. No, it's like college is you're learning how to learn. And you learn this like most kids aren't ready to go to college when they go to college because they're still looking at it as this uh, you know big box they need to check, and they have a list of things they have to do, and they view it. And I can say this because I went to college, but I was older, and I had to help some of my friends to be like, stop thinking about this class this way, think about it this way, and all of a sudden they their curiosity sparked, and they went off and they did great. But a lot of kids when they go to college are not ready for that complete unstructured time because they've been so programmed to have that structured time. If that makes sense.
It does. I think the piece which I'm always intrigued by is when you had this break between high school and college, and we were talking about this a little bit, but for me, it was you get good grades to get into a good college. You get a good college so you can get a good job. You get a good job so you can make money so you can retire. Or actually, even before that is, you get good grades to get into good college to get a good job. You get a good job so you can afford a house. You get a house so you can get married. You get married so you can like have kids. You get kids, and there's like this big checkbox list. And I think a lot of us get sucked into this, which is like, and then you get to that point, and you're like, okay, I've accomplished all those things. What do I win? Like, what do I get? And that at some point you forget to like actually the whole process is something you should enjoy. Yeah, if you actually have to live. There's a great book if you're interested in this concept of called Die with Zero. And the whole premise of the book is legitimately dying with $0. Like dying.
Can't take it with you.
You can't take it with you. And your kids are going to have their own journey, or even if you allocate some, but the rest should be your idea is to die with zero with experiences and things like that. Again, I'm generalizing the whole book. The thing which like throws this whole thing weird to me is think about my business partner, professional hockey player, the whole story there, and it's awesome. He's a Harvard graduate. He got into Harvard not because academically, he will be the first to say, like his academics did not justify his education. Like there's no way he was getting into Harvard with his academic career. However, he was a really, really, really good hockey player, and that's what got him into Harvard. The way he got a good hockey career is because way early on, his parents saw a passion. They came from a sports family. I am not a sports family. No one in my family is a sports family. So like some of this seems crazy to me. But like for him and his kids, hockey, baseball, pick your sport. And then at a very young age, it was learn and become better at that sport, get better at it. Here's professional trainers. Here's personal trainers. Here's every single hockey, baseball career you can get into. Okay, you've gotten to this point. Well, don't do a forward, be a goalie, because goalies are more sought after than the forwards. Forwards are too competitive. Goalies are like more, you're able to get in more. And now as they've grown, same thing. Their sports career, we'll call it career, but like they're in high school. They would take, and this is a nuts one. This is more like a common in the East Coast. You do a 13th year because during your 13th year of high school, we'll call it, it's not an academic thing. You take a bunch of fluff classes for your body to develop an extra year because you're in that height of 18 years old. You're getting more muscle and everything like that. So you get that extra year to make you even better so you can justify higher education. What's crazy about this is way early on, you made a decision to say, hey, we are going to force this skill. Maybe not force, foster it. Because again, they enjoyed it. It wasn't like it was just a chore. I've talked to them about it. But foster the skill to justify getting into a college. They'll probably never go on to be professional baseball and hockey. Maybe they do. But I'm wondering if you can take this exact same principle and apply it to other passions. Let's use programming, or let's use programming as an example. Is my daughter really interested in Crunch Labs, been going through that engineering. She loves STEM, which is cool. But teaching, I have an old computer. I popped it out, teaching her how to type. Why can't I apply the exact same concept to programming? So by the time she even gets to those courses in high school, like it's gonna be like, haha, these are a joke. And then you come out of high school, we'll say, into college where you actually could go right, you have your career. Now she might hate programming, not hate it, but like she finds something she enjoys, but almost like build this as your backup career. If you cannot succeed or if you can't follow your passion, at least you have this as your fallback. Like, is this an insane way of thinking? Like, can you apply the same concept?
Well, first of all, and I'll be the first to say this, I think programming has become a basic skill that needs to be taught as early as possible because, not everyone's going to be working for Microsoft, but everyone can use programming to make their lives easier. We were just talking today, like the other day, I used ChatGPT because I hated this one local movie theater's schedule system and their calendar. And I was like, it'd be great if this was just in a Google Calendar. And I just used Python, ChatGPT, and the Google APIs to just parse and upload it. And that made my life a little easier because now I can just go to my phone and look at it that way rather than going to a non-mobile website that doesn't work very well. And like that makes me happy. Like that feels like a useful life skill, even though as stupid as that little project is. So I take a slightly different perspective with regards to programming in that I think first graders should be taught programming, right? Like I think it's literally a base skill in the modern world that if you don't have it, you are being potentially held back no matter what job you're in. Mm-hmm. Seriously, no matter what job you're in. You can even say if you're somebody working on a construction site, there's probably still things there where it would be useful. Maybe not as you're moving things from point A to point B, but still.
I could even see thinking like the idea of thinking like a programmer too, which is thinking in processes, thinking that, okay, we grab this, we grab the lumber from over here, one piece at a time. Programmatically, how would I do this? And go, wait, there's a more efficient way and more optimized way.
That's really the core of it. When you teach programming, you're not teaching programming for the sake of programming. You're teaching it for problem solving skills. And so that you can apply it into different domains, right? So that's what you're really teaching. And that's really hard to teach. It is really hard to teach. But programming is the best way I think we've figured out how to do that with, at least in my opinion, and I'm super biased because that's my profession. So I'll say that. So no, I don't think you're crazy, but I take a different perspective on why we should integrate that stuff in as early as possible, not to make more hackers, but to make people that will be more functional in a computerized world. Right.
So I'll take this a step. Oh gosh, maybe dystopian. Dystopian sounds terrible, but in the same way though, is as people have come to me multiple times now saying, how do I get into the profession? How do I do hacking? How do I do pen testing? And oftentimes I say, well, there's two pieces to this. There's really how do you become, we'll say, information security consultant or a consultant, we'll say, and then how do you learn the technical skills? The technical skills on the great side of things, like when we learned it, it was always that, like, if you went to the IRC channel, the secret knock, and then maybe someone would give you some information, and most likely it was a virus. Like, it was gross, so gross. It was so much harder back then. But where now you have Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, zillions of CTFs, open methodologies, OWASP, like complete web methodology testing guide. Here are every step you need to take to test a web application. You have so many resources. But when they come to me, oftentimes there's two pieces. Like you have to better your communication skills. You have to do this, and they go, "Well, what could I do?" And I'm like, I'm thinking in my mind, going like, it's going to be a couple years for you to learn the technical skills, and it's going to be a couple years for you to like refine your communication skills because you have to understand something quite well in order to explain it simply to a layman. Like it was Einstein had that great quote, which was like, you should be able to, the summary is like, you need to be able to describe something simply. And if you can describe it simply, you actually understand the subject. But I think back going, man, if they could learn this earlier. When I look at my daughter, if you could learn this earlier. And I can't help but people smarter than me who work at giant corporations like an Apple, like a Google, like a FANG company going, huh, we can just like factory, like how our education system was built now, giant factories getting involved in our education system going, here is how you educate kids to become a factory worker. Now that the factories are really like dying, becoming automated, how long until the same thing happens with these giant tech companies go, our education system is not building the employees that we want. And you get large companies, 50, 100,000 employees, who now they go, we can actually invest a smaller investment into the next generation of, we'll call it free interns, paid interns, but we can invest into the education system. And instead of getting factory workers, we get programmers, we get education, we trade school, like kind of like, I think there's a special name for it, like a school which is just dedicated to kicking out Google employees.
It's called a magnet school, right? So magnet schools exist, and I'm not sure exactly what their funding routes are, like who actually funds them, if they're technically public or if it's run by the state or if it's run by private organizations. I will say, I'm pretty sure if you, for example, go look at Apple headquarters and find the nearest set of schools, you'll probably find a public school or a private school that's run by Apple. Like that would not surprise me at all. But yeah, so like
as a quick interjection here. I remember when Google first came out with like all their big crazy benefits, like free massage chairs and free sleeping. They had free childcare, and part of me now gets worried going, okay, children, here's what we're going to learn. Here is the God of Google. Here's how you can become a good follower of Google.
Of Google.
So magnet schools.
Like the indoctrination camp for kids for Google or Apple. That's hilarious. Probably happened. That's headcanon now. That's that is now officially a conspiracy theory. So like these schools exist. New Jersey is well known for magnet schools, and I'm pretty sure magnet schools exist all over the country. There's magnet schools for art, and a magnet school, for people who don't know, is functionally like a high school that is specialized for one type of thing. So there can be art magnet schools where everyone in that high school is learning the base high school things, but then they do a lot more art classes than your typical high school would do. And everyone there is interested in that. So it's kind of like pre-college almost. Mm-hmm. And so those things exist, and definitely there do exist magnet schools for science and programming and all that stuff. What we're really talking about, I always laugh because, like, do you know the story of Hershey, Pennsylvania, the Hershey Company?
Vaguely.
All right, so the Hershey Company, the chocolate company, existed in a town created by Milton Hershey, the guy's name, and that town existed only because the Hershey chocolate factory existed. All of the factory workers lived in that town. It was a company town, and that's. It's big Pennsylvania lore around Hershey, Pennsylvania, but that town existed, and all of those schools got created, and all the infrastructure and all that stuff basically was created by Milton Hershey on top of all of the chocolate dollars. And so that's what we're talking about. It's like, do you have a Google or an Apple or whatever near their headquarters creating Appleton and all of the, high school of Appleton. And it's a private school, except that if you work at Apple, your kids get to go there for free type situation. Like that's what Milton Hershey did. And do we pull that forward so that instead of the factory town creating Milton Hershey factory workers, instead it creates Apple programmers or workers that work at Apple? And is that a good idea, or is that absolutely terrifying? Right? Like, I think it's terrifying. I think it's both.
It's both. And here's where my mind, and then you can see me just cringing, going like, "Oh gosh, it's such a good idea and such a terrible idea," because like, oh, you could do it in such a way. Apple, $1 trillion company. Here's the way you take over the world. You have that much money. You present it as this college is so like you can imagine the commercial. College is so expensive. You're going to go into $250,000 worth of debt. In that case, if you come to us, we will give you college for free. We will teach you this curriculum. In an exchange, again, dressed up a little bit, you will work for us for 4 years after graduation. Effectively, you have a system of
I mean,
indentured
that exists.
servitude of and that does exist right now. You go here, we will pay for your college education if afterwards you come and work for us. It would be cheaper for them to go, here's your college, it's free college, but if you go there and you graduate, you will work for us for this salary for 5 years, 6
Yeah,
years.
this exists. This is how the government gets people. I say that like it's a nefarious thing, but the National Science Foundation that has these things. If you take a Science Foundation scholarship, you're required to work for them for 4 years, or you have to pay back every cent they gave you. Or the company that wants to hire you can agree to buy out that contract, essentially. And then presumably if they do that, they're going to want their investment back too. So it's the same thing. Like that's so these things absolutely exist. You know, whether or not they exist in the context of we also own the school. You could probably say Stanford is owned by Google and and Apple. So
I mean, what's so terrifying about it too is the whole thing is a sham. Like I know we go back to the topic of like, is it broken and all of that, but like when you actually think about how much money is involved in college right now, like it's a whole mess. And I think we can all acknowledge it's broken. Any student it is nuts to me that as a student who's barely legally adult, like you, really interesting, by the way, if you are under 18, you can't sign a contract and have it legally binding. This was really weird to me. Like
well,
it makes perfect sense.
unless you're legally emancipated, but yes.
Yeah. But like if Alice signs anything, like my daughter signs anything, not legally binding. If I co-sign it, still not legally binding for her, legally binding for me. But it is nuts that the moment you turn 18, it's like, great, here's a $250,000 loan, which you cannot get out of. You can't file bankruptcy. It will follow you your entire life, and there's no way to get out of it. Like, that is insane. Like, I feel like future generations from us, 50 years from now, will look back at that and go like, they were insane. Like, that is nuts to me.
That current generations are doing that.
Yeah.
Have you heard of our Lord and Savior Bernie Sanders? No. No, I mean like that's a big topic, right? And it's one of the reasons why millennials in particular are being held back economically, because you can almost just see walking around this, how big is their negative number hanging over their head. You can feel it amongst the zeitgeist of our generation that the system broke us both monetarily and in spirit from being able to operate the same way our parents did. And it's because the school system, especially at the time we went through it, was built to make factory workers. And that ain't the real world anymore. And so like we can get into the politics of all of those things that you just talked about, but it's somewhat, I'm not going to say it's somewhat irrelevant, but like that's way beyond the scope of what we want to talk about. But you're right. That is part of, there is an entrenched system that is feeding off of itself that isn't necessarily developing the best skills. It is often there to continue entrenching itself, because at the end of the day, like we think of a school as a machine, but it's really a collective of people, and those people all have jobs, and they all have pressures to keep their jobs, and they all have pressures to make the school better and to apply, endless capitalism and endless growth. And you have to meter that with, well, we're supposed to be serving the people attending, and they're technically not, they're not our captives. they're our clients, right? A student attending college is a client.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't really think about it that way. And students don't think about that way. They think of it as they're being under the control of the school. No, the school, you're paying the school.
Yeah,
you are hiring the school.
that same concept gets applied to a zillion other things in life where it feels like it's completely flipped. And this goes to everything. This even goes to government officials. Like your congressmen are our employees. Congressmen, the president, all of it reports to us as the people, like us as the entire people. We pay their salaries. When they vote to increase their own salaries in Congress, they're not using their mythical money. They're using our money when they want to decide to give money out to overseas. Like, not getting political. That's our money. That's all of our money. When we are the purchasers of college, this is like one of the biggest things I've realized because I'm sending my kids to private school. One of the things I'm noticing right there is like you are the client, and at times it felt like when I've talked to anyone over there, it's like where it's felt like it flipped. It's very quick to be like, no, I can send my kids elsewhere. Like there are other options here, and it's weird. I think that mentality though would be a massive improvement in the college, let's say, experience when you recognize that I am paying them not small amounts of money, large. I think that's one of the biggest keys here is that you have zero idea. Most people, not everyone, most people have zero idea the value of the dollar when they're 18 years old. You've never had a career that's made over 35,000. Again, I'm making up an arbitrary number, but most people under 18 have not made $35,000 in a year. Because of that, you don't understand. Like these are just made up numbers to you. $100,000 is a made up number, or you haven't like worked enough life to recognize it. And I use the example of almost like hiring an employee or something like that. And if you're hiring that employee, so it cost our entire house renovation. It's like $100,000. Like we bought this house cheap. It was smoked in, 90-year-old smoker, 2 packs a day. It was gross. We got the whole house. And how he smoked, either way, how he smoked 2 packs a day at 90 and was still fine. It's amazing. Tar was coming down the walls. It cost $100,000 to renovate the whole house. When you hire an employee for $200,000, that's like renovating my entire house twice. And you look, and if it's a terrible employee, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I can renovate my house twice for the amount I'm spending on you. Like there should be some value I'm getting. Now flip this on the other way is you're paying college maybe $50,000 a year, and that's enough to renovate half my house. Like it's not that big of a house. Point being is like that is a lot of money to spend and not get a tremendous amount of value. And I think the reason why the system has continued turning itself over is because the understanding of the value of the dollar is kind of not there at that age. Does that make sense? I know I was all over the place on that one.
Well, and you're not wrong because, when I went to school, I was 6 years. I went through the military. Maybe I didn't understand the value of a dollar because you're somewhat pampered, and otherwise abused in the military. But when I got out, I knew from kind of day one, I'm going to college. I'm going to make the most of this because I don't want to go back in the military. And it was paid for. And I actually sat down and did the numbers. I was like, wow, oh my God, the next 4 years of my life is being paid for. And this is how much it is. I feel a responsibility to make the most of it. So if they're going to ask me to take a bullshit class, this is the hacker, right, portion of it. Like this is where if you can teach a kid this and they go to college, I have no doubt they will be successful in whatever they do. If they have the ability to sit down and go, what is adjudication is the wrong word, accreditation. What is the accreditation standard for the program that I am attempting to do? And then sit there and figure out how to design their own program within the accreditation standards such that they avoid all of the bullshit classes they don't want to take and only take classes that is relevant to their interest. That is 100% allowed. You can do that with the approval of the faculty because they have to make sure that your program is accredited to whatever program they're running at the school. But as long as it fits those guidelines, which are set forth by third parties and potentially the government, you can do whatever you want. All of the programs that they have said you will take this, here's your list of classes, those are pre-made and pre-built for the general student, but 97% of students never look outside that box, right? and they're really going by those guidelines. And when I went in, I was like, no, I'm not taking this class because I've already learned it all. And they're like, well, you can't say you've learned it all. And I'm like, I can. I spent 6 years as a network analyst. I can say that I don't need this class. Well, you're not qualified to qualify your qualifications is, basically bullshit, that some kind of bullshit that they say. Um, and and I, at one point I actually said to somebody, I was like, it would be a shame if your veteran attrition went up by one. and they were like, all right, let's have a conversation. I was like, that's what I thought, because the relationship here isn't, you're not in charge of me, I'm in charge of my own education, right? And that ownership, I think teaching, it's almost like you don't want to teach a kid this, or like you have to choose very wisely when you teach them how to leverage this. Because I'm not a parent, but I have to imagine it would be a nightmare. It would be a complete nightmare if you had a 12-year-old that understood this.
I would say being aware of what you don't know. And I know that there's a hard balance there. Being aware of what you don't know. Because here's the problem is if you make them too aware, and like I have any concept of what I'm doing, let me assure you, there is no plan. But with if you teach the child, teach anyone how much they don't know, it breeds imposter syndrome. Because you start realizing, I will never be good enough because I'll never know enough. I mean, that is the death of a consultant, when you realize like how much you don't know, because then you can't, you lose your ability to be able to talk. Yeah, fake it till you make it. So if you do it too much, if you go too much the other way, you realize like it's imposter syndrome. If you go, be proud of what you do know, that paradigm of you are the client, then all of a sudden it's a hard balance, because you if you go too much the other way, all of a sudden they're an arrogant jerk who's a know-it-all.
I was going to say you just have a Karen factory at that point.
You just have a Karen factory. That's a great way of saying it. It's a hard balance, and it's just like it's fun. I looked at Melissa one time, and I remember saying we were dealing with. So my daughter has a fear of dogs. It's like one of those things which is just, it's not based on anything. We've talked about this. It's not based on anything. She's never had a bad experience. She's like never even saw a dog which was bigger than a teacup Yorkie, which is my brother's dog named the Dude, which is just awesome. But it's not based on anything, and she's getting better at it. But I laughed and I looked at Melissa, and she bought a book specifically on this fear and how to overcome it, and a zillion different ways of doing it. One of those things. Thank you. Yes, I just get a picture of your dog. I appreciate it. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful dog. But I laughed and I looked at Melissa. I'm like, you know what? It would be great if someone wrote a book on this stuff, or we were joking with kids, or anything we come with complexity on it. We always joke, you're like, it would be great if an expert actually wrote down what they knew about parenting so we could learn from that. And then you laugh and you're like, oh my gosh, there's tons and tons and tons of parenting books, all which like help solve these problems. I haven't read any of these things, but you realize there's a lot of education out there, but you laugh. There's a lot of ability to self-educate, but there is a remarkable, difficult ability of knowing what is of value when you don't know what you don't know. What resources are good resources?
Oh yeah. No, I mean that is actually one of the entire purposes, and you're gonna laugh because I'm gonna circle back. It's one of the entire reasons why college is what it is. It's why you have to take calculus or take one of those bullshit classes, so that you get exposed to, the phrase is a liberal education, but a widespread education with a lot of different forms of knowledge, so that you can not just teach yourself one particular set of skills. I have a particular set of skills, but also to be able to apply the same processes no matter what domain you're in. So calculus, for example, you're going through, and teachers are notorious about this. In class 101, they'll teach you how to do it the basic way, so that you get the shortcut in the next class, but then you learn the basic way is actually flawed, right? It's just an approximation of how to actually solve the problem. And what you learn, one of the key pieces of information I learned is that from college is that someone who's teaching you something is always lying, so
How
that they can
so?
simplify the problem in a way that you, who does not understand it, can. Right? There's always going to be an omission of additional details that they are incapable of telling you because they don't have 2 years to, to do it. So there will always be a lie there, and you have to kind of suss out where is there gaps where I don't know something, so that I can take what they're giving me, but then understand where to limit how I pass that on, right? Not to play the game of telephone, right? Does that make sense? Am I just rambling?
No, it does. I think I was looking at a comment saying from Gators, we have to teach our kids we have to teach our kids know how to go learn. I think what he flip that. We have to teach our kids how to go and learn and research and feed their curiosity. And I think like I have this idea of like what how do you grow as a consultant is I think you exploit your curiosity in the service of others, where you capitalize on your unique curiosity, but you exploit your curiosity in the service of others. And I think that is the piece of it. Oh gosh,
Yeah,
there's so
I
many
think
windows
that's a
popping up.
yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. Now, getting back to the schooling, is this so? Let's circle back to the topic. Is the system of education in our country broken in this regard? Do we do that? Um, I think it largely depends on where you go. Like, obviously, I had a decent school that I went to, but not everyone does. So, the realities of the schooling system aside, even at the good schools, we'll say, are even those schools broken for trying to produce people who are ready to enter an industry like the hacking industry in general, right? Do the good schools produce good hackers, or is that just more of a foregone conclusion for the kid who's just predisposed to going into it?
There's lots of problems with our education system, like lots of them. And I mean, I don't think education, just compensation for teachers alone is a whole nother
Yeah.
topic. But if I look you back on my teachers, there was a very distinct split between what I felt, again, personally, what I felt was a good teacher versus what was a poor teacher. A poor teacher was, you know, here is the lesson. Here is the very cookie cutter lesson. Here is the very cookie cutter homework. Here is how I grade your homework. Where I think of my favorite teacher I ever had was a world history teacher. And all he did was lecture. Like the whole here is the outline of what I'm going to lecture about. Here's the full lecture, and then your test, which came usually once a month or something like that, was just you'd give you like 6 or 8 questions, and you had to pick like 3 of them. Like he'd give you double the amount of questions, and they were essay, and they weren't like describe the wars in Mesopotamia or anything like that. It was opinion ones of how what would have the outcome been? What do you think the outcome would have been if Alexander the Great was successful, or whatever it is? Like I'm like
Oh, yeah.
how could he have been successful in these 3 regions? So you had to hear the thing, but your essay was written on, oh, well, after he conquered it all, he didn't have proper governmentship on all these individual fiefdoms. So he would have had to have more interaction with the government, whatever it is. But it was a lot of, I need to take the information, I need to process it in my own head and come up with a unique idea. And now this is harder in mathematics, and it's harder in some of the sciences. But I think that's the type of education where we need to shift to, where it's this: here is the knowledge. Now process it and come up with your unique perspective. I mean, this idea of grab, process, come up with a unique solution is the basis for almost every job out there. Every job in programming, every job in computers, heck, if you want to make a YouTube career, there's no new information under the sun. Very rarely is there new things. It's grab existing information, filter it through your unique perspective, and come up with a better way of communicating it. I think that's
Filter
where
your personal GPT inside your head.
yes.
Yeah.
We triggered the algo. Now we're on the
Yeah.
now we are growing with AI. I think that's the core of it, is building an education system which gives you educate you for the sake of education, gives you grows that ability to process it and then communicate it properly.
I always loved one of my history teachers. His name was Mr. Hunter. He always had a saying about history. History's not the study of dates, names, and places. It's the study of human behavior. And I've that's always stuck with me. I don't remember fuck all from the rest of his class, which is a tragedy, but I do remember that, right? And it was exactly what you're talking about. It wasn't, what year did this happen in? It was, what was the primary reason for the assassination of blah? And it was more about understanding, so World War II, or World War One, what happened, what led to the death of Kaiser Wilhelm. I think it was Kaiser Wilhelm that caused it. I'm probably butchering it. That basically strummed up that, and it's not that something happened. That something happened doesn't matter. Why that thing happened and what it caused matters way more. And the same thing happens in business. It's like whatever the problem you're facing in front of you doesn't matter. It only matters how you got there and how you're proceeding to it. And then if you look at the players in the space and the people and what their interests are, it's funny that if you understand that about studying history, you can apply that directly to dealing with your current day-to-day problem solving. So yeah. So does the school system teach that perspective? I think they try. But are they structured?
It depends on the teacher.
Are they structured to do it in a computerized world? I don't know. I have to say, my experience is no, and the more I look around, the more I still see factory worker production systems.
I think what feeds into it too is a lot of the standardized testing. You have to do the CAT test, you have to do the MEP test, and there was this whole concept I never even heard of until all of a sudden I've now heard the term a bunch, called Common Core. And I've heard all this weird discussion around it, it's really bad and it's really good. And then when I actually looked it up, it made a lot of sense, which was there is a whole mush when you get to middle school, right into high school, of you can learn, you can learn world civ or geography at different grade levels. And the whole purpose of Common Core was you learn geography in 9th grade, you learn world history in 10th. So if the student moves between schools, you don't get geography twice, or you don't have to do grades. That was the purpose of it. But when I look at the problem with Common Core, it works really well when you have the Department of Education, which is here is Common Core for the entire country. And then it's followed. It allows very little deviation to the school's perspective. Even if you have someone super passionate about this is the way I think we should better educate, there's no way they're going to be able to change Common Core for the whole country. And I think we're going to start seeing, going to the future of education, I do think we're going to see more and more charter-like schools. And what did you call them? More and more magnet schools. I think we're going to see more and more magnet schools where I think it's going to be needed. I think it is going to be needed because you have to find the skill, the kids who the kid's passionate about, and try and make a career out of that thing. Because I don't think the education system is sustainable where you're coming out of high school. This is why we have a college education fund. I'm starting for the girls. I'm trying to invest in because I don't want them coming out of college with $100,000 worth of debt. I don't think it's sustainable where it is right now.
I mean, I did 1 year. It's funny. I did 1 year of community college and then joined the military, right? And what I learned of that 1 year of community college was that I did not want to spend $50,000 to $100,000 to learn I hated something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's insane. Think about it. We have a saying. We had a saying in the Navy: "Choose your rate, choose your fate," because the profession that you chose, or whatever you want to call it, the job that you chose going in the Navy, dictated the opportunities for advancement. It dictated whether or not you were going to go out to sea and how often you went out to sea. It dictated all of those things. But as an ignorant non-Navy person who has no way of understanding the system they're about to enter, you have no real way of knowing what choosing this rate over another one means for the next 4 to 6 years of your life. If you talk to somebody already in those rates for an extended period of time, they'd be able to tell you what the system is going to be today, but that system could change in 2 years, right? So that's why there's that saying, choose your rate, choose your fate. An 18-year-old kid coming out of high school being told, choose your fate, going to college, what a nightmare of a system we've developed in that sense, right? Choose, because it's the same thing. Choose it. You want to do world history as a degree. I think that's wonderful. There's no way an 18-year-old really understands what you can do with a world history degree.
Yeah,
They just don't.
There is. And this is where you get tons and tons of degrees which go nowhere.
And it's so this is where you and I would probably disagree. There's still value in getting that degree, but understanding the value in terms of job prospects is only one piece of that value, right? Like, it still teaches you how to teach yourself. The problem is it's not necessarily going to translate to I'm checking a box on a job application, right? So I still think there's value in doing these things, but you got to be realistic. Like, a system that sets up kids to go study that en masse is creating a country that is setting their kids up for failure the moment they turn 18, which is insane.
If you're going into college straight out of high school, I think the only reason to go to college straight out of high school is if you pick a degree completely based on job prospects, not on education, not on anything like that, completely based on jobs prospects. If I go to college now, like if I go to college now, or if you go to later, I already went to college, but I mean, like if I wanted to pursue a doctorate or something like that, now at this late stage in life where very late stage, middle age, if you go to college now, it's to be educated. It's because I want to get a degree. But then I don't know, like I don't even know what would possess
I don't even
someone
care
to
about
go.
the degree.
That's the thing, is I don't know what possessed me to go back to college to get a PhD outside of if I wanted to go and teach. But even if I wanted to teach, there's better mechanisms than going to a physical room and like going to that. Like I can teach online, like do a podcast. But I think, like, I don't know why you would go to college. I guess that's where I'm spinning to as I talk about this. I don't know why you would go to college to be educated when there's so many free resources. Historically, 50 years ago, that was really the best way. There was libraries, there was that. Now you can teach yourself anything online. Why would I go to college unless it's for a job prospect?
There's actual reasons. Pre-structured tinker time, right? One of the reason why it costs so much to go to college is because you're basically not working for those 4 years. And surprise, surprise, it's real expensive to just exist and not produce value for someone, right? So that's part of it. And that's a really diminutive way. I'm really just that shrinking it down to the reason why there is value in going to college is not just to be in the room with people and learn those things, because a lot of those they're doing it online anyway. But it's also the ability to have that unstructured time to explore all of these different areas and get a wider, general, enriched education. So there is value. Like I put it this way. Um, I had a class that was essentially CTF the class, where yeah, existing is expensive. I had a class that I called basically CTF the class. It was a cybersecurity class where they taught you how to exploit things, and then your homework is basically CTF problems. Um, and it was like you went to class, I think it was twice a week for 1 hour, and then you're doing all of your study on your own or with your lab partners or whatever. But it's not like you're in that class every day. You're in that class once or twice a week, and then the rest of your existence during that time is to tinker, is to play, is to figure out the problems, is to do the reading, is to do all that stuff. And so that's why it's partially so expensive. But all of that unstructured time where you're not required to be at a job, where you're not required to do anything else but dedicate it to learning something you're interested in, that's the value. That's the real value of it. You can say, yeah, you don't need any of this. Go off, get a job, and do this on your part time. That's homework, and I hate homework. So I'm gonna end my stream on that statement.
I mean, you know what? You and I think, had very, very different college experiences because
We did.
I look at my college and say, I needed my piece of paper. I went to 3 different universities looking for teachers who really actually cared about education and knew what they were talking about. Because cybersecurity wasn't a degree program. Like
Yeah.
network security had just become a degree program like halfway through my college, where it was like now all of a sudden they're teaching, but there was too much money to be made in the industry. No one was teaching it. Like unless you had a huge passion for it, no one was teaching it. My degree, I would have not gotten my job at General Electric if I did not have a degree. So I needed my piece of paper. But I had lost so many credits in the transition between the 3 different universities. My last 2 years, I took normal workload is like 14 credits, 15 credits a semester. I took 21 credits one semester and 23 credits another semester. And the way I was able to do that, this is not like, oh, I'm so smart. The only reason I was able to do that was because I went to all like 4 of the professors. I'm like, your capstone project is a little too easy for me. How about I do this instead, which is a project I built my second year, like in my free time. And then they're like, yeah, that's actually more challenging. Let's do that. And then I did that to 4 different teachers, and all the teachers said, yeah, yeah, that sounds great. I got it in writing, and then submitted the exact same project to all 4 of them. And one of them found out. They're like, you can't do that. I'm like, well, is this project 4 times as much work as yours? And they're like, you're right. Actually, it is. I got it all in writing and all of that. But my point is like, it was to get a piece of paper, and it wasn't for education. My strongest times, I learned the absolute most. And I would say, like, you want to know the key for success, the key for education, like, this is my opinion of it, is find people who are smarter than you or passionate about their subject and go learn from them. And I use this example of like, I had no idea how to do any sort of reverse engineering. I had kind of got the cusp, but there was like the secret handshake. There was the tools to know. There was Ollie debug, and there wasn't a lot of great documentation online. It was Poncho. We started reverse engineering like the Steam vac engine and looking at how the anti-cheat systems work. And like those were like incredible times. And then you had Bunny, hardware hacking. Like he was the one who got me like introduced to a lot of other people. But none of that, all of that happened at a university, but it wasn't the teachers at the university teaching. It was other people who were passionate about education who pushed you along. And that's where it's like,
Oh no,
there
that's
needs
fair.
to be a place where smart people gather.
And I'll leave it on this. Our experiences really aren't that different, because the day I went, my first semester, I joined functionally one of the research labs as just an undergraduate student who was there to read papers and listen to what other people in their PhD programs were doing, and then like futz around and see if I could fit in that sense. And when I not failed out of one lab, when I decided one lab wasn't for me, I found another lab. And this was like, I did exactly what you said, just in a different manner. which was I went and I found people who were passionate about what they wanted to learn, and then we read research papers together, essentially, and we went over ideas, and we fumbled in the dark until we found cool things to do. Um, th- that environment doesn't really exist and isn't fostered well outside of the university space unless what you're being asked to do for your job is R&D. And R&D shops are hard to get into. So I don't think our experience was that different. We just applied it in different ways. I went through more of the structure than you did, if you will. Like, I don't think you would have had the same experience or would have enjoyed it as much going through the research labs at a school.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean,
yeah,
with that, I do think the education system is broken. I think it's fundamentally broken.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see it getting fixed. And that's not like defeatist or anything like that. I do think your education for that ability to tinker and be curious and all of that, I think has to come. Like, again, Gator's been like shouting in the comments this entire time. It's like, this is why I homeschool. And I would appreciate that. And I think there is if you need to find solutions outside of school to help grow this. But the cool thing is, there's so many of them coming out now. I think a lot of other people are seeing this problem. You have like Mark Rober doing like Crunch Labs. Now it's like 1 month. It's like a box month thing, which is so good if you have young kids. But I think there's more and more people recognizing this and more education programs coming out online, which are not like, here's the cert you need to sign up for, but just free education, which is better structured. So it's broken. But I think there's solutions underway which are outside the education system. Kind of my 2 cents there.
Everything is broken forever. The end. Delete computers, return to monkey.
Thanks for joining us if you're there. Thank you, Gator, Braden, all the people, and Taylor in chat who have joined us. Thank you for watching. And as always, hack on.